القديم أنا من شوارع فلسطين الحبيبة أنا من القدس من البلدة القديمة أنا من شوارع فلسطين الحبيبة أنا من القدس 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 من البلدة القديمة أنا من شوارع فلسطين الحبيبة أنا من القدس من البلدة القديمة أنا من شوارع فلسطين الحبيبة أنا من القدس أنا.
You are listening to Conversations on the Way. I'm your host, Nana Jumpy, and I'm looking forward to sharing conversations at the various intersections of liberation for the people and the planet with you. Thank you for being here with us. Today's conversation is at the intersection of a free Palestine and a free world.
لتحرير الأرض والإنسان سأبقى أناضل لتحرير الأرض والإنسان أنا من القدس أنا من القدس أنا من القدس أنا من القدس.
Of course, I want to begin I don't even know. I want to begin with my condolences, but that word is too small. I want to begin expressing solidarity with you and the Palestinian people forever. But solidarity also is a very small word compared to the feeling that I have. And just to let you know that I see what is happening and understand what is happening and am really honored and humbled that you are able to take the time to have this conversation with me today. So thank you so much. Thank you, Michel.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I thank you back for being one of the many few, many free people in the world that are standing behind the Palestinian people's struggle for liberation and freedom. The Palestinian people, I know for sure, hear those voices and appreciate them and are grateful to the courage that you guys, the free people of the world, have, especially facing the oppression that you also face in the Western Hemisphere, in the West. So not to say one word on behalf of the Palestinian people, but you still go out to the streets and you still voice your solidarity and your standing with the Palestinians with courage and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is all we can do, because we know that we are not free until Palestine is free. If we think we are fooling ourselves.
Yes.
Please,
to that.
Please help us to know right now, the latest information that you have about what is happening in Palestine. Maybe the top 3 things that you can share with us. If there's more, don't be shy, but really wanting to get an understanding, because for most of us, we're getting information, if we're lucky, through the Palestinian people who are on the ground courageously sharing the information in spite of the targeting that Israel has done of journalists and bloggers and others who have been sharing the information. But a lot of people are not getting the true information of what is happening in Palestine right now. So could you please share at least some 3, top things that we should know if we don't know anything else? These are the things we should know about what's happening in Palestine right now.
Nothing can tell the situation in Palestine as well as the numbers. Although the Palestinian people are not numbers, they have names and families, but the numbers are so big, you cannot name everyone. You need days to do this. But these things will tell you the story of the kind of genocide, a genocide that Gaza and the Palestinian people are facing at this moment. There is over 21,000 people have been killed since the beginning, since October. You're talking about a little over than 2 months. 50,000 wounded. 8,000 are missing and presumed to be still under the rubbles. 60%, at least 60% of Gaza had been destroyed. All the hospitals, all the schools, all the water purification plants, all the electrical plants, everything of the infrastructure has been destroyed. 1.8 million people have been displaced. These are the top things that easily can tell the story of Gaza and how much they are facing of a catastrophe of ethnic cleansing, of murder, of killing, and at the moment by one of the most militarized military, the most powerful militaries in the world, that they have all kinds of weapon that is supplied by the United States and the rest of the Western NATO countries. We're talking about from nuclear weapons all the way to the 1-ton explosive and rockets that they deploy in Gaza.
You know, as you're talking, it's, as you said, those numbers are astronomical. We have this conversation on this show earlier talking about what is happening in the Sudan. We know what is happening in the Congo. We know, what has happened in the past in so many places where our people, the people of the global South, as Commandante Fidel said, the dark corners of the world, how many of our people have been killed, murdered at the hands of empire. And it's just shocking. And when you say, and outrageous and enraging, right? And when you talk about the numbers of Palestinian people who have been killed over the past couple of months, you would think that that kind of massacre, that kind of carnage would have a really public outcry. I think of the Soweto massacre in South Africa. No, the outcry didn't end apartheid in that moment, but there was an outcry, right? You think about what happened in the civil rights movement, and particularly with the children's campaign and the attack on the children causing this outcry. And yet it seems that in the case of Palestine, you have a clear outcry, by most of the people of the world, and their governments are just refusing to listen. And, I tell people I'm old as dirt and twice as funky. I am not new. So I know, I brought up apartheid as an example. And we know how long it took for apartheid to fall. And we know that the United States was fully behind the apartheid government. But we do know that there were measures that were taken. I don't care if it was keeping them from being involved in sports, boycott, sanctions, efforts to divest, and just not hearing that same loudness of noise with respect to what is happening right now. Do you think differently? I know you also have been in this movement work for a while. Does it seem like there's something different about some of the the way in which it's not such a loud condemnation in this case, or with some more official bodies? Or is there something, that I'm missing? Maybe this is what has happened and what happens all the time.
Well, it's been happening since, the start of the colonization campaigns in Europe, and later also joined by the United States. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because at the time when Belgium was killing 10 million people in Congo, for example, and destroying Congo, and when Germany was destroying the whole nations of the Herero and the Nama, and destroying Tanzania and Namibia, and France was destroying African countries like Algeria and others, the philosophers and the political elite in Europe were speaking about human rights, about freedom, about self-determination for countries. At the same time, while these killings were happening, so there was two land, like as if it is two places. They were speaking only to their own European and Western countries, and as if the people of color of the rest of the world, this talk does not consider them. Why that they were able to do that? Because the sounds of the victims were not heard. 10 million people in Congo, nobody heard about it. Same thing in Namibia, same thing in Tanzania, same thing in Algeria. And the difference now is because of the presence of the breakout of the mainstream media that was controlled by the West and was used as indoctrination, like apparatus, to brainwash the people, to make them think in the West, to make them think in a certain way, to believe the government narrative, and to stay within the parameters of the Western political organization that kept them in line. This time, the presence of the social media broke that hegemony of the Western mainstream media, the movies, and other apparatus that the Western government were using to keep their people in line. Now, the social media made the Palestinian narrative available to them. People discovered the lies. People discovered that false narrative that is presented to them. People saw the truth on the ground, the destruction, the killing, the murdering. They saw all of the ethnic cleansing that Israel was doing to the Palestinians, and their humanity came back to occupy them. Their brainwash. Their brains that have been brainwashed and erased from seeing the truth have been populated again with what's happening in Palestine. And many of them broke from this ideological clinch, if you want, and came out to the streets, expressed their humanity, expressed their solidarity with the Palestinian people, and expressed their desire to see that the Palestinians deserve to be free, deserve to have their own country back, deserve to have the right to self-determination, deserve to have their flag and their identity card to control their own destinies. That is happening right now. But, the Western governments and the entities, if you will, of the big of the big companies and corporations that control the West, they don't want to give up their privilege of controlling, hegemonizing the whole world, because that's their source of profit. Their source of existence is to steal people's wealth, to dominate peoples and keep them oppressed, and as cheap labor and other ways to use them, to be in control of the world. They will not give up that easily. They have to be defeated by the world, and the whole system of profits and oppression and colonization be dismantled to create a new world for all of us, the people who in the world, in the South especially, who've been denied all their rights. And now Palestine is spearheading this fight for all of us, not just for Palestinians, not just for Arabs, but for all the people of the world who desire to be free, independent from the control of these big corporations and companies that are sucking their blood dry. So that's why instinctively the people of the world feel that, know that. That's why they're going to the street, not just on behalf of the Palestinian people and to be in solidarity with them, but on behalf of themselves, to be free themselves. And as you mentioned in the intro, you said, if one of us is not free, all of us is not free. Injustice for one is injustice for all. That's the law of humanity, of existence. And I hope we all internalize this in the fight for the Palestinian people. But again, it is the fight for ourselves.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I was thinking about how for the longest time, some of us have been fighting and speaking up about Sudan, but it is with the fight around Palestine that's the fight in Sudan, for Sudanese sovereignty, for the sovereignty of the Sudanese people. Let me be clear, that now comes more to the fore, right? People are getting more attention on what is happening in the Congo based upon what is happening in Palestine. Even the Scottish, who every year keep trying to figure out how to get themselves independent from Great Britain. I'm hearing the rumblings even of the white man trying to figure out how to free himself from Great Britain. It is, and that's what they fear, as far as I'm concerned. That's what they fear. When you see the United States, when you see the United Kingdom, when you see the head of the European Union, when you see these Western leaders supporting Israel just with everything that they have unconditionally, I really feel that a big piece of it is that they understand that there are certain places that still represent a certain fight for freedom, for self-determination, so for sovereignty. Palestine is clearly one that is, sort of seen on a worldwide level. I argue all the time, Puerto Rico is another. There's places where they have determined if they allow those places to be those people, to be able to have their sovereignty, that it's going to set something off. In the same way, as you were talking, I was thinking about the role of social media with Black Lives Matter, and how, as an attorney, criminal defense attorney, when I first came into the game, if you said to a jury that the cop lied, oh my goodness, like even if they ruled in your favor, when you went in the hallway, the jurors were yelling at you. When you went back in the courtroom, the judge was yelling at you. Like everyone was so horrified and offended that you would dare to say that the police lied, or dare to talk about police violence, systemic police violence against Black people. But after Black Lives Matter, came to the surface, especially with the, through social media, not only did it change people's understanding and address that brainwashing, but it also gave other people platforms, language, energy to be able to speak up for liberation beyond the conversation that Black Lives Matter has started. And I see exactly as you see this happening here.
Yes.
Any comments on that, with your thoughts on that?
Yes, of course, because the desire to be free, the desire to control your own destiny, the desire to be able to do to your family, to your friends, what you like, and without the interference of the government, as soon as your behavior and your actions does not hurt anybody else, is a human condition. And we have been blacks, browns, red, all the people of color who have been oppressed. We have been denied these things, especially in the West. Black people have, for 400 years, have had their own genocide and Holocaust. Africa is the same. It's the same way. The Palestinians are the same way. The Arabs in Algeria, in Libya, and other countries in Iraq, they have the same conditions that has been inflicted on them by the racist governments of the West. And the hypocrisy of all of this is that the system that has been built by the West post Second World War and the laws that they put in place, they are established it, they don't even follow it. For example, the international law is to the side of the occupied to fight the occupier in any way they could, including violence. And now the media and the Western governments talk about the right of Israel for self-defense. Can you imagine that? Self-defense from whom? From the occupied. An occupier doesn't have the right to self-defense. It's the occupied who has the right to fight the occupier using all means necessary, including violence, including armed struggle, and that's what the Palestinians are doing. But the Western government and the media functions according to the laws of Joseph Goebbels, who was the main propagandist for the Nazi regime, for Hitler, when he said, if you lie a big lie and you keep repeating that big lie, people eventually will believe it. Even the person who lies believe it himself. So that's what's been happening. And the way they do it is that they take an entity and they vilify it. And then they reduce the whole movement with that entity after it's been vilified. They did that in Cuba. They did that in Venezuela. They did that in Iraq and Baghdad, with Saddam Hussein, for example. And they're doing that in Russia with everything is Putin right now. So on the Palestinian side, everything is Hamas. And they don't even say it right. So Hamas becomes this entity that is made of the non-humans or the human animals, as the Israeli leaders have described the Palestinian people as human animals. So those non-humans, Hamas, that they represent the Palestinian people in this fight, which means by de facto that the Palestinian people are non-humans, it's all right to kill them, to destroy them, and not to feel any human emotion towards them. And then this whole big lies about what's going on appeals to the prejudices that has been built for decades in the West. So it appeals to them.
Exactly.
They have the tendency to believe these lies. Why? Because the Israelis are part of us, but Hamas and the Palestinians are the others, non-humans. So that's what's happening in Palestine. That's what happened to the blacks in Africa. That's what happened to the blacks in the black slaves in the U.S. And we can go back and talk about all this propaganda and all these lies one by one, and you'll be surprised. It's the same thing they said about blacks, they say about Palestinians. The same thing they said about the Native Americans, they say about Palestinians now. So it's the same entity that is inflicting this pain and this oppression and this killing and murdering on the Palestinians. It's the same entity that have done the same thing to the blacks, to the browns, and to the native indigenous people, whether in America or in Australia. And I keep telling you, because they said that they say in their propaganda that the Palestinian people are anti-Semitics. And I tell them always when they say that, because I'm criticizing Zionism, which is a political entity, when I criticize Israeli practices and policies of settler colonialism, and they accuse me of being anti-Semitic, and I tell them, listen, the Palestinian people and the Arabs have developed Judaism. Judaism started there, started with Arabs and Palestinians, so we cannot be anti-Semitic. The second thing, anti-Semitism was created in the West, not in our part of the world. The Western world, the political, and I'm not including the people here because the people are as victims to the political organization and the governments of the West that is composed of big companies and people who are after profits and money. I tell them that those governments have created Nazism in the West. They created fascism in the West. They created
Absolutely
Zionism in the West. It's not us who created that. We, the Palestinian people, have created Judaism, have created Christianity, have created Islam, and given it to the world. We did not create hate. We created love. We did not create racism. We created inclusion. And that goes for the rest of the people of the South. We don't know these kind of movements. We don't know this kind of racism. So, look in the mirror first, and then you will see the truth. Don't project your hate on us, because we're fighting for humanity. We're fighting for love, of being free, for freedom, for peace, for justice. We are on the right side of history. And it doesn't matter, because they have said that about, they said they labeled as terrorist the ANC in South Africa, Nelson Mandela. They labeled as terrorist the movement in Cuba, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, in El Salvador, in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, in Algeria, in India, everywhere. Any movement that was working for liberation, for independence, for freedom, it's labeled as terrorist. So I keep telling people, if that's the company we have, well, that's, it's a good kind of terrorism, because terrorism against the
good
occupiers.
company indeed. Let me interrupt you there. Good company indeed. And you can add the Black Panther Party and a whole bunch of other groups, right? And a whole bunch of other movements to that conversation. And thank you for bringing up Cuba, because I was going to bring up Cuba again, because I just came from being a prosecutor in an international tribunal of the U.S. for its embargo on Cuba. And, I just kept thinking the whole time, the way the U.S. has gone after Cuba for, again, about 75 years, about the same amount of time as we're talking about with Palestine and the occupation by Israel. And it's like, these folks just take this so seriously. It's so important to them. And we have to know why. Let me shift the gears a little bit, Michel, because I also hear people, because of course the propaganda doesn't end. And there is a part of the propaganda that says, hey, look, what is happening right now? In fact, I think they just, some folks in the Israeli government just said this again yesterday. And they've been saying it. And so you hear it get repeated. And the propaganda is, what's happening is all Hamas's fault. What's happening is all the Palestinians' fault. It's almost like the abuser that slaps someone in the face and then says, you made me do that to you, but it's like at any time, all Hamas has to do is just give up all the hostages and this will all be over. All the Palestinians have to do is just turn over all of the Hamas fighters and Israel will walk away and everyone will be friends again, like the end of a Hallmark movie. They'll hold hands, and sing over the campfire. You can tell by my sarcasm how I feel about that. But wanting to, I'm saying this as a Black woman from Ghana and in Ghana in this moment, I'm having this conversation. But when you hear that propaganda, not just as a Palestinian who's an activist and, who as an expert in this, but as someone who has an understanding of how Israel also has been operating, what do you think when you hear that propaganda?
Well, what I think about that propaganda is like telling the Jewish rebels in the Warsaw Ghetto when they rose up against the Nazis, oh, you should have not rose against the Nazis because you know what the Nazis would do. And the Nazis did. They went to Warsaw, destroyed Warsaw completely, and the ghetto, and killed so many people. This is the same thing telling the Cuban Revolution, oh, you should have not done that because you know what the reaction of the Batista and government and those who help and aid the Batista government, what they're going to do against the Cuban people. And they can say the same thing to Venezuela, to Chavez. And they did that. They went and destroyed and killed a lot of Venezuelans. And in Algeria lost 2 million people against their revolution and liberation movement against the French. And the same thing with Libyans against the Italians. So when you say that, and India with Mahatma Gandhi, even it was a peaceful, they didn't use armed struggle, but peaceful revolution, they suffered the same thing. So that's the occupiers, that's the settler colonial argument. They want the people who rise up to not do anything, because if you do anything, that's what happens to you. So to me, all this destruction in Gaza, all this killing in Gaza, it's a message basically by the Zionists, by the fascist Zionists who are adapted doing to the Palestinian what have been done to the Jews by Nazi Germany. This is a message to the rest of the world or to the rest of the Arabs. You can, if you do anything to liberate yourself, if you do anything against us in our attempt to take your countries, to take your wealth, if you do anything, that's what you're going to face. So you have to sit down, be slaves, good slaves, and eat your food. That's it, and be happy. Don't think about freedom. Don't think about being free. Then don't think about liberty. Don't think about being a human being. You're just a slave to us, and we give you the gift of keeping you alive. But if you do any other things, will destroy you, your loved ones, your families, your schools, your hospitals. We leave you without water, without food, without medicine, to die and rot on your own land. That is the message of the occupier. They have not called any movement after, since liberation movements started to rebel against them. Everybody was called a terrorist, and everybody got that message. Namibia will tell you that. Congo will tell you that. Every country, Patrice Lumumba will tell you that. Mossadegh in Iran will tell you that. Anybody who wants to be independent from the will of the empire, from the will of these big corporations and companies that control the West and wants to control the world, that is what waits for them if they raise their head high and desire to live free and to control their own destiny.
And it's just so clear. I mean, to me, it's so clear. And, I think about the time of enslavement of African people, not just in the United States, but throughout the Western Hemisphere. And there were so many rebellions. People knew that they were fighting against, a much, larger crew than them. And they still fought. I mean, when you look at what happened in the continent of Africa, just everywhere in which you had people colonized, people fought back, understanding that they were facing great odds. And we support them. I mean, we honor them. We sing songs to them. We put statues up for them. We tell our children about them and our grandchildren and others about them. These are the people who we sing praise songs to because of their courage and what they were willing to do. But as you said, obviously, when, in the story that's being told by the hunter, the lion is always terrible, right? And the hunter is always the one that actually is the brave one and is really out there, taking on this immense challenge. And, oh my gosh, we can't believe it when it is the hunter who is armed, right? And I want to add briefly, and, I know you want to comment, of course, I want you to continue you sharing your thoughts, that so often, in spite of all of their bigness and militariness and they lose. They lose because in the end, those who are oppressed are going to win, period. When folks ask me, well, how come, you should be on the show and you're telling people that, they should be pushing Hamas to give all the hostages up? Say, for what? For what? There's no logical, intelligent reason why they would do that. None. The Israelis won't even admit, the Israeli government won't even admit in this moment that it is the one that was shooting and killing its own people. It won't admit that in this moment. They didn't care. They could have had a conversation about hostages long ago if the Zionist government was interested in that. They're not interested in hostages. They're interested in the total destruction, the ethnocide, the genocide of the Palestinian people, and the total occupation of the land. And there's nothing that you can concede to that government, the Zionist government, that's going to make them come off their path. They have made a decision that they've drawn the line. This is where it's happening. And it leaves no other capacity at this point but to fight them with even more ferocity and with even more energy. And for those of us, in my view, who are in support of Palestine, to support that ferocity, to support that ferocity, to support the all-out, let's make it happen, defense of human dignity, defense of self-determination, defense of people, defense of loved ones, as we would do for our own selves in a similar situation. I hope that people just wouldn't lay down and just allow themselves to be slaughtered.
Yes. And the idea is that the empires throughout history have been blind. They are blinded for their desire to take resources, become rich, and live, privileged, and the rest of the people will serve, their way of life. They are blind to see that since the beginning of history, and since, for example, the slave rebel against Rome, I forget the name of the person who led it, but since then, every revolution, every was born out of this desire of the people to be free. Every organization that led any fight, whether in Africa, in Latin America, in the enslavement of Black, and destruction of the native indigenous people in the United States and in Australia and other continents, these were fights born out of the people's desire to be free, while the oppression was born out of the desire for more land, for more profits, for more wealth, for racism and feeling superiority. So you can tell by analyzing the desires of the freedom fighter and the desires of the occupier and the settler colonial person, you will see the difference. The same thing I ask people when they say, well, Hamas is a terrorist organization and they kill people, innocent people. And I keep saying, well, just tell me why Hamas is there, why Hamas exists. Isn't it because it represents a desire to be free, a desire for the fight to end this occupation, to end this colonial settler entity that is choking them, to end this racism that is being practiced on them, this apartheid that they live, to free the resources so they can live in dignity. And what is the Zionist government or army is born of? Isn't it fighting for more land, fighting for more oppression, fighting for expansion and wealth and control? So this is very clear. Anybody can just ask these questions and think about it for a moment. If they have a heart that is willing to accept the truth, they'll see it. The truth will set them free.
Mm-hmm.
But they are controlled, so their minds are controlled so much. Now the people in the West are breaking free out of this control, but there's still the diehards still there, and they're doing everything they can to stop this wave that is spreading in the West, the wave of consciousness, the way of seeing clearly what's going on. And we have to keep this burning desire to free ourselves of the lie, of the narrative of the oppressor, to see the narrative of the oppressed and to aid it to, this is the only way to free yourselves. Those companies, the military complex, the big corporations, that they control these matrices of control, these matrices of power, they're not going to let you free if you ask them. The freedom and liberation it's not going to be handed down to you freely. You fight. And this is why I want to talk about the Palestinian fighting side. We talked about the Palestinian victim. It's true, but the Palestinian is not a victim. The Palestinian is a freedom fighter. He's fighting now in Gaza. He's fighting in the West Bank. He's fighting the oppressor, the colonial settler, oppressor, occupier, with dignity, with courage, with pride, giving their lives for that. And if you just recently, somebody did reputed organization did a poll on the Palestinian people, and 2/3 plus within the Palestinian people in Gaza, in the West Bank and outside, 2/3 plus supported what the resistance is doing in Gaza. Because the resistance is not just Hamas. Hamas is one faction out of more than 12, 13 factions that represent the Palestinian people. So the fight is not between Israel and Hamas. The fight is between Israel and the Palestinian people as a whole. And the Palestinian people are telling the resistance, keep going. We're ready to pay the price. It's okay. We know our enemy. We know the cruelty of this enemy. We know the barbarism of this enemy. So it's all right. We can take it. We're willing to pay the price for the next generation to live free on our own land, for the next generation to be able to be independent, to control their own destiny, to live in dignity and love and peace. So that is the Palestinian people. No matter, the Palestinian people has been fighting for over 100 years, since the beginning of the Zionist project. is not just 1948. Way before that, against the Zionist gangs and the British. In 1948, they suffered more than 50 massacres. 500 villages and towns has been erased completely. The ethnic cleansing was horrible. They know they are facing the same thing now all over again. Oh, they've been facing it all along. So Gaza and the fight for Gaza did not start in October like they try to pick that point as a beginning starting point. It started with the Zionist project that is a Western project. The Jews who have joined the Zionist movement and the Zionist colonial project are as victims. They have been victimized also by the Zionist movement. They hijacked them. They hijacked their history. They hijacked their struggle against Nazism and the suffering against Nazism and fascism, and made them think that Zionism and Judaism are the same, and it is not. Judaism is a religion that has been espoused by many in the world. The Palestinian indigenous Palestinian Jews still there. Many of them fight along the rest of the Palestinians of other, other religions or non-religions, because Palestinians are very diversified. There's Muslims, Christian, Jews, and non-believers also. So all of these Palestinians have united in one goal. We need to free ourselves. We need to liberate Palestine, and we need to defeat this political, racist ideology that has got nothing to do with any religion, but is a creation of the colonial West. And if you go and read the Jewish State book that started the Zionist movement, written by Herzl, and write what he wrote to Rhodes. Rhodes is the guy who started the colonial movement in Africa.
Absolutely.
Herzl wrote him and said that we belong in your movement because Zionism is essentially a colonial project. So the connection between Zionism and the colonial movement, the Western colonial movement in Africa, is from the beginning is connected. You go back and look at this literature, this history that is available to everyone to go and look at. It's there. Is Zionism and the manifestation of Zionism as Israel and the Arab world is the same as every colonial movement that happened in any continent of the world, including South America, Latin America, and Africa.
Absolutely. Let me interrupt you briefly here as well. And thank you for that, because I think that people need to be able to make those connections. And I'm going to let you go soon, but the conversation is good. And I think there's so much you're bringing into, to the front so that people can have some things to think about. I think about, most of the folks listening are people who would describe themselves anywhere from liberal all the way to revolutionary. And the folks who are liberal, as Martin Luther King Jr. pointed out in his letter in a Birmingham jail, are usually the most difficult to get to understand where the fervor is coming from, where the principle is coming from when we talk about freedom fighting, right? And so we think about the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed because of his freedom fighting. He was not killed just because they decided they didn't want to be bothered with him anymore. The more he spoke up and the more he did, the more he expanded what he was talking about, the more dangerous he became. You can say the same of Malcolm X and so many others who are named and unnamed who were
Lumumba
killed.
And Che Guevara also. They all
Yes.
They're killed.
So many, right? But thinking about this country and the way in which you have so many liberals and others who say, we can't take Trump. If Trump becomes president, it's going to be fascism. The man says he's going to be a dictator. And I do wonder, Michel, I say, look, let's say that Trump was elected president again. I'm finding wood to knock on. But let's say that happened. He's already said he would be a dictator from day one. He doesn't have the military, but he surely has the police. He also has tens of millions of people, at least almost 100 million people, that support him completely and clearly will run into the Capitol building and take over the government if they need to. And I wonder if, in fact, folks looked up and looked out, turned on their TV or listened, their cable or listened on their radio, mainstream media, or looked out their window and saw that Trump is elected, he's become president, and his first order of business has been to basically use the police as an occupying force. So this is inside the country. We're not talking about colonialism, right? We're talking about within this country as an occupying force who now are going to make all of his dreams come true in the ways of oppressing all kinds of different people, right? I wonder, all the talk that these people do, would they fight or would they try to take him to court and pass legislation? You know what I'm saying? Like, what would they do if they really thought that democracy was at stake? If they really, because that's what they claim, democracy's at stake, fascism will come in, it'll be the end of everything. What are people willing to do? Because if you look at what is happening in Palestine, and if you are saying, hey, those people should figure out some nice, kind, gentle way to address what is clearly virulent violence from, a unmovable object in terms of the intent of the Zionist government. I need to understand, what would you do in this country of the United States? Or is it that USians are more deserving of that kind of give me liberty or give me death than Palestinians are?
Well, let me begin this segment by saying, by presenting a criticism of the progressive movement in the United States. Because in Palestine, within my community and the pro-Palestinian, the solidarity movement, we have PEP, and with regard to the progressive movement that are not supporting liberation movements. PEP means PEP, progressive except for Palestine. So they could be good in everything, and then on Palestine they're reactionary. And you cannot be progressive unless you're totally progressive. Progressive is not like you cannot divide it, It has to be consistent, and it has a oneness to it. It's like pregnancy. You cannot be pregnant you cannot be half pregnant or one-third pregnant. You have to be either pregnant or non-pregnant. You have to be either progressive or non-progressive. This is one thing. And when it comes to the system in the United States, it's been created for the benefit of the ruling class. It's been created for the benefit of those big corporations that controls it. So they built this two-party system, which is a parameter for you to move in within. You cannot go outside this parameter. So, for example, as long as I came to this country in 1975, and since then, all I remember is they've been asking us to vote for the least of two evils, not for a good guy against another guy, for a project against another project. It's just the least of two evils, and we always look. What did that do to us? How long we've been voting, Americans? How long you've been voting? Did you see any change? It's getting worse. It doesn't go to the front. So my recommendation, the way I see salvation out of this vicious circle of voting for the least of two evils, is to work in the grassroots. Forget about electoral politics. They are not going to serve you. You can be in the fight, in the debates. You can be there, but what your first bet is your own people. You have to go down to the grassroots level, talk to the people, pull them up with you, educate them about the fallacies that is surrounding them, especially in electoral politics, and educate them about the racism, educate them about being in solidarity with other movements in the world, because it's the same enemy. Educate them about the basics of struggle, and then change will come, because the without the people, there is no change. Your enemy, the system, is working hard on keeping the people ignorant and keeping the people uninvolved, and on keeping the people blind about the truth. See, look at the media. They don't allow the Palestinian narrative, of being showed on TV. If they're not afraid of your narrative, if you're not afraid of the people seeing the truth, why do they stop this narrative? Same thing in Israel. They censorship everything. Israelis are not allowed to see anything that comes from the Palestinian resistance, to see the ground in Gaza. So again, that is the fight. You put your investment, all of your eggs, in the basket of the people, not on the elites. I mean, some people find it easy to rub shoulders with the Congress people and working on electoral policies to be up there. And I'm not saying some don't work with them, but put your most investment and trust in the people and go work there. That's what creates people, activists, fighters, strugglers, who are courageous, who knows the people firsthand. They know them by their first name, and they can represent their interest honestly and in a trusted way. People who work on electoral politics, they just like to be celebrities, and they like the camera, they like the rewards of being in the lights. My advice: look at your own people, look at the grassroots. Those are the real power. Those are the true energy and the true courage. Those are the people. The people are the instrument of change, not politicians.
Absolutely. All power to the people. A great way for us to bring this conversation to a close. Thank you so very much for coming on, Michel. I really appreciate it. How do the people who want to be activated, how do they get in touch with you? Who do you think they should be connecting up with if they want to get some more information, break through some of that brainwashing, and get activated?
Well, they can. We have like a Facebook page called the Free Democratic Palestine Movement. Free Democratic Palestine Movement. They can go there and they can send us messages through that page.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. I really, really appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, as wonderful as we can have it in the midst of all that is happening. I really appreciate you.
The feeling is mutual, and I appreciate you too. I appreciate your words and your conscious work, and you too. Have a great rest of the day and happy holidays.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's our time. I'd like to thank our guests, our board operator, Gary Baca, our assistant producer, Jose Benavides, and you for joining us this week. Conversations on the Way will be back on the air next Wednesday. Be sure to tune in tomorrow to Root Work with Tandasizwe Shimarenga, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, right here on KPFK. Have great conversations today.
الشوارع في المزارع في المصانع في الطرقات في الشوارع في المزارع في المصانع في الطرقات أبواب